Chronicles, Fiction, The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 2, Frenzy, by John Allen Price. Chapter 16.
Mr. Wood, we have a problem,
Hart warned, moving through the circles of officers and civilian officials around the stockholder.
All of our Special Forces squads have reported in, except for hunters.
Are you still tracking their helicopter? Asked Wood, turning his attention to the center's main screen.
Intermittently until about a minute ago. We think they may have activated their anti-radar system.
Then I don't see a problem. I didn't think Hunter would allow his advisors to send any messages. He has to penetrate deeper into the Dark Legion's territory than the other units. Are you trying to contact him?
As per your instructions, no,
said Hart, trying to keep his irritation hidden. Good, keep it that way, Wood ordered. Unless you see obvious signs of all the Pathfinder squads getting into trouble, the operation proceeds as planned. General, advise the strike squadrons to start their final checklists.
Mitch, this is Julia.
We're approaching the drop point, said Alvarez, steadily retarding the throttles. Stand by for repel system deployment. Roger, said Hunter, slipping on his friction gloves. After we're down, head for the ground holding point. Good luck, Julia. See you soon. The gunship's deceleration was so smoothly executed, few noticed it until they realized the landscape outside the hatch windows was no longer moving. With a sharp crack, both hatches rolled forward, and the pylons of the repel system snapped out, their nylon lines still unreeling into the jungle when the squad members at the hatches attached their clamps to them. In unison, they swung out of the cabin and hung on the lines for a few minutes, until the Cutlass had restabilized. Then they slipped down into the jungle and disappeared from sight. The next four repeated the procedure seconds later, and the last squad member, Wendy Levine, was sliding down her line while the other three sets were being retracted. As its main hatch slid shut, the CF-AH-4 lowered its nose slightly and began to move forward. It rapidly picked up airspeed and gained a few feet in altitude before turning sharply for the northeast. In minutes, it would be across the perimeter line and descending from its ground holding point. If all went well, it would be landing just as its experimental shrouding system was in danger of burning out. This is about the quietest jungle I've been in, Shaka remarked, once the noise from the helicopter's main rotors had trailed off to a distant popping. I thought the jungle was supposed to come alive at night, with all sorts of critters.
I think you're right,
said Benetti in a hushed voice.
This is creepy. God, how I hate fighting at night.
You hate fighting anywhere, anytime, Leo. I get the feeling there isn't any place you'd like to fight.
Of course there is. I wouldn't mind invading one of those beach resorts along the ocean. Wouldn't you like to take Nova Miami, Captain?
I'll think about it later, Hunter advised, moving around his squad. A lot later. Standard deployment, troopers. Jake, you'll be the point man for now. Diane, you're the rear guard. Wendy and Rogers, you'll be with me. Ted, you and Redfield will be ahead of us. Leo, you and Harris will stay behind me. Now, even though we have a point man, I want all of you to be on the lookout for anything unusual. We're about to enter combat with an enemy the likes of which no army in mankind's history has ever encountered. I can't really tell what to expect, but you're all professionals, and I'm counting on you to remain that way. Move out. Our trail awaits us. The rest of the squad nodded in agreement with Hunter, then quietly fell into the line of march he had ordered. In the polar regions, the Venusian jungle was not nearly as lush and had few tropical plants. It was more of a temperate rainforest of various scrub pines and spruce trees. This made it easy for the squad to march without trails to follow. Soon they were deep inside the forest, little visited by man, even though he had originally seeded it. The anxiety of the mission and the eeriness of moving through a silent landscape, bathed in auroral light, made them hold their weapons a little tighter and pay close attention to their motion detectors, as well as their infrared and electromagnetic sensors. "Thank you for inviting me, my brother," Ragathol announced, stopping at the entrance to the Citadel's command nexus and bowing respectfully. "For what reason do you bring me here?"
"We've detected human activity,"
said Azurewraith, motioning to the row of terminals staffed by necromutants and showing a wedge-shaped sector of the Citadel's defense grid.
"Of a type not seen in our area before."
Ragathol approached one of the terminals that had displayed the intruders. The group being tracked was moving low across the terrain at a relatively slow speed. However, the infrared sensors in the grid were readily able to follow them.
"Do you feel they're a probing mission of their own?"
asked Ragathol, moving down the row and glancing at the readouts of the other two intruder groups. "Like the manned aircraft and drones? Or could they be precursor forces to a much larger mission?"
"Whatever they are, my brother,"
Azurewraith serenely answered.
"I feel they must be destroyed, and it will be easy for us to do so. They're so puny. Their threat to my citadel is almost non-existent, but I shall deal with them."
"I see you already are." Ragathol glanced at the tactical response board looming over the terminals and could see most of Azurewraith's exoghoul forces taking flight to intercept the intruders. "My departure, do you think they'll interfere with it?"
"No, my brother. They haven't the numbers to interfere with your launch, and I'll not let them. Go, return to the main hangar and complete your preparations. You can expect to depart with minimal delays. My force will soon have a glorious triumph over these pitiful intruders."
"If it would not displease you," said Ragathol, "I would like to stay and watch your triumph unfold. In doing so, I could personally report to Algaroth your success in holding off any human interference."
"Yes, I can see where that would please him,"
said Azurewraith, his initial expression of anger giving way to elation. He smiled as if he were about to kill something, then broke into a hideous laugh that rolled and echoed through the high ceiling.
"Stay then, my brother, and watch the triumph. Do you know the humans once called themselves Earthlings, back when they lived exclusively on their home world? I must remember that. It makes them sound so pathetic."
"I knew it wouldn't take us long to find something," Hunter said quietly after getting tapped on the shoulder by Rogers. "What bearing is it?"
"It's over there,"
Rogers finally advised, pointing to his left. Due to their proximity to the South Pole, his EM scanner was unable to give an accurate heading.
"And the electromagnetic field is pretty strong. It's gotta be something a lot bigger than a power line."
"Wendy, what are you reading?"
"Just us,"
she said, swinging the motion detector in a slow arc.
"I got this thing set so sensitive, it'll pick up tree squirrels if there are any."
"All right, let's move," said Hunter. "To the southeast. Signal if you spot anything." As the squad changed direction, it switched from a single-file march to a skirmish line. They had not advanced more than a few dozen yards when they came upon a non-symmetrical crosswork of electrical lines. They surrounded a transformer-like device that glowed and sputtered softly. "It's a power node for their sensor array," Rogers identified, getting within a foot of it. "We knock it out and we'll interrupt the outer grid." "Until a backup kicks in," said Hunter. "I hope we'll find most of those as well."
Leo, mine it.
Sure thing, Captain,
said Venetti, signaling Harris that he wanted to look in his backpack.
100-gram charge will do it. Shall I arm it with a remote detonator or a time fuse?
You better make it a time fuse. From the way the aurora looks, solar flare activity is pretty strong tonight. Hunter straightened up and glanced at the patches of night sky visible through the forest canopy. The curtains of ionized gas were multicolored instead of pale white, and the soft crackling had now become as sharp as distant thunder. I don't think your transmitter is strong enough to break through this interference. Set this charge to go off at H-hour -5 minutes. Venetti acknowledged his order, and in minutes had a charge of plastic explosive assembled and armed. By then, the squad's other teams had spread out from the site and discovered their targets. There's another power node, Shacker informed, instructing Hunter where to train his night scope. And that is an observation post. The pyramid-shaped structure was exactly hidden among the conifer trees, making it all but invisible from the air. On the ground, however, it was far more obvious, especially when the heretics manning it had the interior lights on and their glow spilled through the slit windows on every face of the structure.
A couple of 3-second bursts will shred the place, said Halston, joining Hunter and Shacker. Give me the word, Captain.
The word is no, Sergeant, said Hunter. Remember what the briefers told us? Any kind of military activity will attract Dark Legion attention, and gunfire most certainly qualifies. Since he's done with the first power node, get Leo up here. We'll mine both the second node and the observation post. Jake, get Diane. If anyone can sneak up to that post, she can.
At last, the crash site, Alvarez remarked, her tension easing. Jeff, deactivate the shrouding system. Deploying skids.
Nearly 20 miles east of the drop point, and just inside the Dark Legion territory, lay the wreckage of what had been a civilian-owned Hercules III cargo lifter. The giant aircraft had strayed off course during a routine flight, and without any of the jamming systems on the military models, it had been an easy kill for the defense grid. In the months since then, the site had been scavenged by the Legion, but the largest pieces of wreckage still littered the site and would provide the perfect cover for the gunship. Having already seen reconnaissance images of the area, Alvarez made a straight-in approach and sat down beside the intact tail section. There were no trees to interfere with the landing, not even partial stumps, and the rotor wash kicked up deposits of fine ash from the forest fire touched off by the crash. The gray veil spread across the site, though, would be dispersed by the wind once the helicopter stopped generating it.
Shutting everything down,
said Alvarez, her hands flying over the control panels in her cockpit.
Except for the auxiliary power turbine, the radios, and the weapons system. This site will give us the perfect cover from Legion sensor scans, so long as we don't create too much electronic activity. Julia, how long will we stay? Asked Sutter, once the post-landing procedures had ended. Until we get orders from Mitch, no one else matters, not even the battle station. What if one of those other squads needs our help? It'll be more than an hour before the first FA-99s arrive. They'll have to fend for themselves as best they can, said Alvarez, irritated. We all knew that when we went into this mission, so don't act so surprised about it now. Yes, I understand. Julia? What is it now? I think there's someone out there, said Sutter in a small, trembling voice. I think he's watching the ship. Damn it, Jeff. I thought you said this place was uninhabited, Alvarez replied, fighting off the paralyzing fear Sutter's warning created by using anger. Lynn, where is this guy? Lieutenant, I swear there was no one here, said Taylor, bringing both turrets back online. The infrared barely picked up any animals. He's off on our left, Julia, Sutter answered, and behind us. By releasing her shoulder straps, Alvarez could turn just far enough to see the figure standing at the edge of the crash site. He appeared somewhat taller than a normal man, and while the auroral light was too weak to make most details stand out, she could see a ridge of spikes on his head. However, What unnerved her most was the way he stood, motionless, like a predator, waiting for the prey to take flight in panic.
"He's just within the firing arc of the tail turret," said Taylor. "Want me to nail him?" "No, not yet," said Alvarez, fighting to control her fear. "He hasn't made a move on us. Hell, he hasn't moved at all since Lynn spotted him. What gives with this guy? It's spooky." "What do the sensors show?"
"Infrared, nothing," Taylor answered, reading off what one of his CRT screens displayed while he relayed the data to the pilot's cockpit. "Motion detector, nothing. The tail turret's laser tracker shows he hasn't moved a centimeter since being spotted."
"Kill it, Julia," Sutter implored, "before it attacks or reports us to the Citadel."
"I'm not picking up any radio transmissions from the area, Lieutenant." Taylor quickly scanned his electronic surveillance system panel and found only its status light active.
"We're the only ones talking here. Give me a close-up of the aft gun's camera,"
said Alvarez.
"I'm beginning to think this creature's more than inhuman."
On her cockpit center display screen, the silent and so far motionless figure appeared and grew until its head and shoulders filled it. The dim auroral light needed to be enhanced for any detail to become visible. First and most obvious was the creature's face, frozen in what appeared to be a scream of agony. It took a few seconds for Alvarez to realize not only were the creature's eyes lifeless, everything else about it was.
"Good God, it's a statue,"
Alvarez finally concluded.
"A damn statue. Now why would the Dark Legion want to set up something like this?"
said Taylor, studying the same image. "To scare people?
Maybe that's exactly why they erected it. Or perhaps it marks the site of some great victory of theirs over mankind.
Some victory this was. Shooting down an unarmed civilian plane ain't much of a challenge. This isn't something I'd celebrate."
"Perhaps that's exactly what it is to them," said Alvarez. "Remember, the Legion isn't us, so don't go around expecting them to act and think like us." "And what are we going to do about this thing?"
Sutter responded, the tone of her voice no longer fearful.
"Leave it alone. We're practically sitting in the shadow of a Legion base, so we're not going to attract attention by knocking over one of their statues. If you want, we'll fly in a street gang and let them vandalize it later." "When I initially spotted them, Corporal, I thought they were helicopters,"
said Private Renya Ozawa, pointing first at the observation tower's main screen.
"Now I don't know what they are." "Don't feel ashamed, Renya-san,"
said Momoko Watanabe.
"Unless you've spent a lot of time here, you wouldn't know what the Dark Legion has or is capable of."
In the days following the destruction of her reconnaissance warhead by the Legion raiding force, there had been at last the influx of personnel and equipment she and the rest of her outpost staff had repeatedly requested. While she no longer had to do her watch tours alone, Watanabe knew far larger reinforcements had been sent to the Mishima frontier with Bauhaus, where a border clash threatened because Bauhaus tracked the raiding force back into Mishima territory.
"I'm confused, Corporal," Ozawa admitted. "Didn't the Legion use helicopters on their last incursions?" "Yes, they appear to have a good supply of human aircraft and spacecraft,"
said Watanabe. Stepping up to the immense control and communications console, she turned most of her attention to one of its auxiliary screens, where a computer analysis of the Dark Legion's intercepting forces was just ending.
"However, they appear to use them only on operations beyond their territory. Inside it, they prefer using their own creations. Yes, they're using their exoghouls."
"I'm sorry, their what?"
"Winged beasts, biotechnical creations of flesh and metal. They can carry almost any weapon imaginable and are horrifying in combat, as we'll soon see."
While she spoke, Watanabe called up a reconnaissance file from the computer's memory and displayed it on a data screen. She ran the final moments of the months-old warhead flight deep inside the Citadel territory. Through the swirling clouds, a centaur-like animal with furiously beating wings appeared. Its powerful legs were tucked under its body, and its arms were outstretched. It held a Gatling gun-style weapon in one hand, where it fired at the wildly evading warhead. The other was empty, until it snatched the drone out of the air. The last image transmitted was one of the exoghouls' horned, malevolently grinning mouth, its reptilian jaws open wide to engulf the drone. Then Watanabe turned to the console's tactical screen, where small clusters of symbols were about to be overtaken by larger forces.
"Is this what will happen to the capital special forces?"
asked Ozawa, still transfixed by what had been displayed on the auxiliary screen.
"If they are flying feline strike fighters or gunships, they would have a chance,"
Watanabe soberly observed.
"However, they have only infantry weapons and jump shoots. I hope they'll all die gloriously in combat. I think one of the squad may be able to evade interception." "Why would you want them to die?" "Because capture by the Dark Legion is a far worse fate. A living death in the service of evil. I sincerely wish we could warn them or help them, but this of course is against Mishima policy."
"What should we do, Corporal?" asked Ozawa.
"Order the rest of our warhead drones launched,"
said Watanabe,
"and tell the cafeteria we'll be taking our meals up here. This Special Forces squad won't be the end of it, Renya-san. I suspect Capital will come with its assault on the Citadel. Tonight will be an even longer night than it usually is."
"This looks like it once was a Bauhaus system," said Vanetti, when he realized the base of the missile launcher he was working on had a vague hexagonal shape.
"No wonder the Legion found it easy to destroy the defenses at Base Aquila."
"We'll do weapons identification at the debrief," Hunter advised. "Just hurry up and finish mining this thing. We have a lot more targets before we reach the inner defense zone."
"Finished, Captain. What detonation time do you want?"
"Set it for 1 minute before H hour. The last one we set won't go off until 10 minutes before H hour," Shacker whispered in Hunter's ear.
"What gives, Captain? I thought we were to knock out the net, either on or just before H hour. You're setting detonation times all over the map."
"It's to give the impression that a much larger force is out here than a single squad," said Hunter, "and that it's operating in the outer defense zone instead of heading into the Citadel. I hope we can keep them guessing long enough for us to slip inside."
"Mitch, I'm picking up something on operational channels,"
Roger said quietly, cupping his hand over one of the earphones.
"Distress calls."
His half-whispered warning cut through the other conversations and the background noise like a thunderclap. The rest of the squad fell silent as Hunter moved around the automated launcher to join Rogers. He briefly listened in on one of the transmissions with an auxiliary set of headphones, then ordered Rogers to switch to his radio set's external speakers.
"This is a sword point to anyone listening,"
Hogan shouted, his voice barely audible above the whistling wind and the growl of his jet chute engine.
"My squad is under attack. We need reinforcements now. We need
Hogan's pleas were drowned out by an inhuman snarling and snapping of skeletal wings. His screams and the transmission itself was cut short by a snapping sound. Static mercifully filled the channel and the air around the launcher until Rogers shut off the speaker.
"From earlier reports I've heard, at least one of the other squads has been similarly attacked," he said. "We may be the only Pathfinder unit still functional. Is there anything we can do to help them?"
asked Wendy. "I'm afraid not," said Hunter. "And in the cold calculation of warfare, I hope their deaths will draw attention away from us. In that respect, we can ensure that they didn't die in vain. Move out, Diane. You have the point."
"On the whole, sir, these reports are not good,"
concluded the senior coordinating officer after he gave Wood printed transcripts of the latest messages intercepted by the battle station.
"Only one of our Special Forces squads has apparently evaded attack."
"And what about Squad Trident?" said Wood, when he realized they were not mentioned in the transcripts. "You've heard nothing from them?"
"Not since their departure from forward base threshold. They could either be on schedule or brought down before even reaching their drop point."
"I can't believe Bamble and Sutter would go this long without sending in even the briefest progress report," said Hart, for once showing more concern than smug arrogance.
"Perhaps the Colonel's right. Maybe they were shot down or crashed."
"Since their locator beacon hasn't been detected, I'll choose to believe they're on schedule. Wood responded, handing the sheets over to Hart. And the rest of the operation continues as planned. Even if only one squad is still viable, they can still create enough havoc for it to succeed, Colonel. Advise the air bases to begin launching their aircraft in 10 minutes. Mutant Chronicles, Fiction. The Apostle of Insanity Trilogy, Volume 2, Frenzy, by John Allen Price. Chapter 16. End.